Hello, my name's Chris Anderson and I will be your English teacher today. To start the lesson, I'd like you to think of a dream. Not a dream you've had while you were sleeping, but a dream about your life or a dream about the world. It could be about your job, it could be about money, it could be about anything. It doesn't matter if this unreal situation is completely ridiculous, completely incredible. That's the point of unreal situations anyway, isn't it? So, how in English do we describe unreal situations, hypothetical situations? Well, to do this, we use the second conditional. The second conditional, unlike zero conditionals or first conditionals, describes imaginary situations in the present, whereas the zero and first conditionals talk about real situations in the present or future possibilities. And to start with, let's look at the form. So, as you can see, we've got if plus the subject with past simple or continuous. Now, the strange thing about second conditional sentences is we use the past to describe unreal situations in the present. This is generally true in English in general. Then we follow the past verb with the object of the sentence. The comma, it's important not to forget the comma when you start a conditional sentence with if. Then we use would, could, and might. Now, would describes completely imaginary situations, could describes the possibility, and might, very uncertain, literally 50-50, in the future, followed by the bare infinitive. Now, the thing to remember about the second conditional, we're describing an unreal situation in the present and the consequences later on. For example, if I won $1 million, I wouldn't spend it quickly. So, we've got a very imaginary situation here. This person hasn't got $1 million, they haven't won $1 million, but if they did, this is what they would do with it, and in this case, this sensible person wouldn't spend it quickly. Similarly, if I won £1 million, I'd give it to charity. Again, this person doesn't have £1 million, they haven't won £1 million, but if they did, they would give it to charity. If I didn't work so much, I wouldn't drink so much. Unreal situation. This person, by using the negative, is saying that they do work so much, and because they work so much, they drink so much. But if they didn't, the consequences would be that they would drink less. I would be very tired if I lived to be 100. So, as with all conditional sentences, the second conditional, we can swap the halves. The meaning is exactly the same, the emphasis is a little bit different. In this case, the unreal situation being, if I live to be 100 years old, the consequences, this time at the start, being, I would be very tired. Here we can see he could be a doctor if he studied hard. So again, we're not talking directly about an imaginary situation, we're using could, so we're describing the possibility. In this case, the possibility of somebody becoming a doctor if, in the present, they studied hard. And because we're using the second conditional in this way, we're possibly saying this person doesn't study hard. But if they did, they would have the possibility of becoming a doctor. If you gave me money, I might help you. So again, we haven't been given any money. Nobody has given us any money, but if they did, we might, 50-50, help them in this unreal situation. So far, we've looked at the primary function of the second conditional, which is describing unreal or hypothetical situations in the present with the consequences in the future. Now what we're going to do is look at the secondary function of the second conditional. We can also use the second conditional for giving advice. For example, if I were you, I wouldn't eat that meat. So, as you can see, the structure of the second conditional sentence is exactly the same, and in a way, it's still hypothetical. If I were you, well, I'm not you. But in this situation, we've got some meat that's bad, and we're saying to somebody, don't eat that meat. But we're adding emphasis by using the second conditional. So in the same way, I would get a doctor to look at that if I were you. Again, I'm not you, but this is what I strongly recommend you do. So there is a problem with this person. To look at that, a medical problem of some kind, and this is what I would recommend doing. If I were you, I'd look for a new place to live. Again, strong advice using the second conditional. We've seen where somebody lives, it's not a great place. And what we're saying is, well, if I was in your position, this is what I would recommend you do. I would go to a dentist if I had teeth like that. Fairly straightforward advice, But we can see here the situation of the teeth is probably quite serious because we're using the second conditional to give advice in this way. The second conditional allows the user quite a lot of freedom in that it talks about hypothetical imaginary situations. So we can talk about anything really. In this way, the second conditional is quite useful when we're asking questions. For example, what would you do if you weren't in prison? So again, we've got a hypothetical situation in the present. Presumably, these people are in prison. And again, we're asking about the consequences. If we weren't here in prison, what would we be doing? And the thing to remember with second conditional questions is that the word order is a little bit different from regular conditional sentences. Would you dance more if you liked the music? Well, these people don't like the music in the situation at the moment, but would they dance more if they did? What would you look like if you didn't have a big beard? So again, we're asking somebody who has got a big beard, in an imaginary world where he shaved his beard off, what would he look like? If Britain was warmer, would you be able to live there? So again, here we're sort of describing an imaginary world where Britain is not the cold place that it actually is, and in fact it's warmer, and we're asking somebody about the consequences. Would you be able to live there? If he wasn't so lazy, what would he be doing with his life? So here we're describing somebody who is lazy and how his life would be different, and asking what he would do in his different life if he wasn't so lazy in this imaginary sentence. So far, we've looked at the second conditional. We looked at how the second conditional is different from zero and first conditionals, which describe things that are generally true and possibilities in the future. We looked at how we can change the meaning of second conditional sentences when describing unreal situations by using would, could, and might. We've also looked at the secondary use of the second conditional, which is giving advice to people. And then we looked at question forms that use the second conditional. Now, to check that you've understood this lesson and that you were listening properly, you can now take the exercises which follow this lesson. Good luck.